Welcome to the World of DaaS, a show for data enthusiasts. I'm your host, Auren Hoffman, CEO of SafeGraph and GP of Flex Capital. For more conversations, videos, and transcripts, visit safegraph.com/podcasts. Hello, fellow data nerds. My guest today is Sir Martin Sorrell. Martin is the founder of WPP, the largest advertising company in the world, which he ran for 30 years.
Used to be, Auren.
That's correct.
It used to be. It's now the fourth. It's gone from first to fourth.
Well, you're still the founder, and now you're currently the executive chairman of S4 Capital,
Right.
which is a pure play digital advertising company you founded in 2018. Martin, welcome to World of DaaS.
Thank you, Auren. Good to be here.
Now, one of the biggest places I think AI could be used right away is in advertising. Do you think we'll see some near-term effects from AI in the ad tech and advertising ecosystem?
Well, I think we already are. So I think the answer to your question is yes, and we already are. So we're seeing it in 5 main areas. The first, probably most obvious, is improving productivity in copywriting and visualization. The second is in hyper-personalization. That's targeting people even more effectively. So instead of producing 1.5 million creative assets, at least in theory, you can introduce multiples of that. The third is media planning and buying. I doubt very much whether there'll be 250,000 people employed in media planning and buying with large networks in 2 years' time, but we'll see. And then the fourth area is using AI as a super tool within your own operation to improve productivity. And then finally, what I think is the most interesting area is knowledge transfer and sort of equality of information, if I can put it that way, i.e., if you feed in all the data you have within your company about clients, in our case, or geographies or capabilities, and you give people open access to it, you effectively, you have human bots. I mean, it's ironic to me that the guy who resigned from DeepMind because he thought AI was an existential threat. So one of the founders of DeepMind at Google, he said that he was worried about, if you had 10,000 bots, mechanical bots, everyone would know what the other 9,999 know, and that's instantly. And you can't do that with human beings. Well, it's true you can't do it with human beings, but what's really interesting is that for an organization, you may well be able now to, if the data is good and if you give people access, you may well be able to get sort of equality of information, and therefore organizations will be flattened. They'll be much more cooperative and much more integrated. And I think that we'll lose a lot of the political problems.
And because in political problems essentially means people are hoarding information.
Well, hoarding is probably an unfair word, but people are good. But people who are good are usually they lack the ability to share. And what you really want, the jewels in companies, I think, are the people who are good and share.
And are there do you think we're just going to have a scenario where just most companies are just going to need fewer employees, fewer full-time employees?
Well, we don't know. The jury's out on that. I don't think anybody knows. Some people say we'll need more people, some people less. Some people say maybe this is, John Maynard Keynes coming true, because in the 1930s he said automation would result in us having more holidays. Yep. Maybe this will be the industrial revolution that achieves that, if that's an achievement. I don't know is the answer. I mean, I can see in those 5 areas that I mentioned, I can see, so example, in media planning and buying, I was listening to somebody presenting a case study at MadFest last week, and the guy from the media company, it was a New Balance case study, the guy from the media company, it was IPG, was very bright, very personable, very interesting to listen to. But as he was talking, it was almost talking like a human bot. And I thought, when he was talking about the research that he did and looking at the various platforms and which platforms should he use, it sort of occurred to me that actually you'd be better off with a mechanical bot who then spat out the information and he would be in a position to evaluate it. So the answer to your question, he wouldn't lose his job,
Yeah.
but he would move from putting the information together, trying to compare the platforms, trying to compare everything else, and in this case, he would receive the information and be able to do something about it.
Now, on a macro perspective, how correlated are ad dollars to economic growth?
Well, they are. I mean, people always talked about ad spending as a proportion of GDP, and if GDP grew, ad spending grew. I think what we've seen in the last year or so is the correlation in an inflationary environment that sort of breaks down a bit.
Yep.
Because what happens is clients are fixing their budgets. And I spoke again at MadFest. I spoke to a woman who was a product manager, a global consumer products company, and she said to me, "Well, we fix our budget as a percentage of net sales, so this is sales after discounts." And she said, she actually was very interesting because she said, "Well, we freeze a little bit of the budget, and every quarter, if we made our numbers, we release the frozen amounts." So this is actually was in that one little story. It seems to me that it encapsulated everything we're seeing at the minute. Is that the CEOs are saying, things are good, and they're putting pressure inside their organizations for performance, and the people inside the organizations are very cautious and are very hesitant to full out commitment. But if things do come out all right, they release the money. But what was interesting about that, instead of sort of fixing it in a way, in a sense related to GDP, what's happened in the last 12 to 18 months is that clients, particularly on the package goods side, if you're getting 10, 15% price increases to cover the costs of inputs, yep, and beyond, because I think there has been some gouging going on, and you're starting to see politically, for example, in the UK, the banks get criticized for not increasing deposit rates, saving rates, and companies being criticized, the retailers or indeed manufacturers, for price increases. But when you are getting that, and you're getting that nominal price increase, that reflected in your gross sales and your net sales after discounts, and therefore, if you fix your ad budget, it's the benefit of inflation. The reverse is also true. When inflation comes under control, it's going to be tougher because clients will be continue to fix their budgets on the basis of net sales, and net sales will not be as strong in a less inflationary environment, at least in nominal terms, and it'll be reduced.
The UK is still seeing quite a bit of inflation, more than almost most other countries right now.
I blame Brexit, but
just because there isn't a larger economy for it to fall back on.
No, I think labour is in short supply, and that's why wage rates, continuing to inflate at 7%. I think we've got data tomorrow, I think, coming out, which will probably confirm we're still above 7%. We'll see how that comes out. And then the other thing is shortage of labour. That's a reflection of the shortage of labour. 1 in 14 people, I heard a statistic in the UK, are sick and off work. So what is that, 6 or 7%? Are sick or off work, so there's labour shortages there. And of course, Brexit cut off cheaper, to be frank, cheaper sources of labour that were coming into the country, and they cut that off. I mean, Boris Johnson platform, what was it, levelling up on salaries? He wanted everybody to be more highly paid in jobs, and wanted Brits to do those jobs that others were prepared to do. And we've lost that. And then the other part of it is much more difficult to deal with Europe. If 50% of your imports and exports were done, or 40%, whatever it was, pre-Brexit, were done with Europe, it's much more difficult to do that job. The delays on importing and exporting are huge. The paperwork on importing exports have increased exponentially. So the frictions inside the system very great. Now, it's true, it's a one-time friction, in the sense that if I've got a delay of 6 months with the supplier, and once I've gone through the first 6 months, I should be in an equilibrium because I'm ordering 6 months faster than I did before. But the bureaucracy and around it all is intolerable to many people.
And do you think from like a UK perspective, is this like long-term bad, or is it just short-term pain, but long-term okay?
No, it's long term very bad. We haven't if Brexit provided an opportunity, which certain people thought it did, that opportunity was not grasped. I mean, even they admit it. I think maybe not Johnson, but Farage certainly admits that the Brexiteers did not seize the opportunity and create Singapore on steroids, or however you phrase it. We just didn't grasp that opportunity, and it was it was 2016 the vote, and we're 6 years on, 7 years on, and we just haven't grasped the opportunity either politically or economically. And so we did have an opportunity. We still have an opportunity, I get, according to those people. But maybe under a Starmer government, if Starmer wins in whenever it is, a year or 18 months' time, maybe it might be different. Maybe he will seek for closer cooperation with Europe, and we'll see. But whatever, I think it's a long-term issue for the UK, and I don't want to be overly gloomy, but I think the UK is in a very sticky position at the minute.
What geographical areas around the world are posed to see the most growth in ad spend?
Well, North and South America, I'm bullish on. I think that sort of time block, that pillar of North and South America is going to be extremely powerful. I mean, America may want manufacturing going back to America, but I don't think high-intensive labor manufacturing is going to go back. It's going to go to Mexico, like Apple and Tesla are pursuing at the moment. So that's one area. Middle East is another. I mean, energy prices are going to stay high, and the Saudi, UAE, Qatar growth will continue. Huge opportunities there. And they're investing a lot of money with a very, very great ambition. I saw that tape of MBS, the Crown Prince, addressing, I think it was an Arab conference, and it was quite remarkable in that he said that he saw the Middle East being the new Europe, and everybody was really very emotional about in response to that, emotionally positive, and he set the room on fire emotionally. And so I think there is a wealth of not just financial resources, but emotional resources. You see it in football, you see it in golf, you see it culturally. And I think the Saudis are being very clever, and the Qataris and the UAE. I mean, they're being very clever in terms of what they're doing culturally to try and improve the relative position. So Middle East, Africa, there will be parts of Africa that will be really interesting, but it's too volatile to my taste. Asia, very strong. 3 of the top 5 economies in 2050 will be from Asia. That there will be China, which will probably be the largest by then. Some people think they won't get larger than the US. I think they will. And then India at number 3, and then Indonesia at 4 or 5. So 3 of the top 5 economies in the world in 2050 are projected to be Asian economies. So because of the uncertainty around Taiwan and the lack of relationship between the US and China, although, Blinken and Yellen's visit may be heralding, maybe Biden, I think we'll be seeing President Xi, so maybe we'll get a little bit more cooperation. I think both sides. The Chinese got their own issues around youth unemployment, around the real estate sector, around the general economy, which is not rebounding from COVID quite as fast as people thought. So we might get some more stimulus there, but maybe we'll see a little bit more. I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic about it because where there's communication, there's positivity. But
well, it sounds like you're bullish on everything except Europe.
No, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay.
So I just mentioned Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. These are all markets that are going to benefit. And then turning to Europe, as you just said, I think France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK have a tough road to hoe. And I think the Ukraine situation. I mean, if the war was resolved in quick time, my view might change. But I think the security risks are so big, and the economic risks are so huge around. And I mean, what's going to happen next winter? Will we have revived, if that's the right word, surge in natural gas prices, in oil prices? If the Chinese economy does start to expand under stimulus, we have a surge in inflation again. So I think there are issues to deal with which are very difficult to forecast, and I think Europe is in a tough spot at the minute.
And while they're still enormously profitable, the ad revenue is slowing at the major platforms like Google and Facebook.
No, hold on. You can't get away with that.
Okay.
So they continue to grow. I mean, where the weakness in the ad market is in the traditional platform, the analog platforms. Look at free-to-air networks in America, with the exception of Fox and Disney, who have big sports properties. I mean, the degradation has been very significant.
Linear TV, essentially.
High single digits,
Yeah.
downdraft. The platforms in Q1 were up about 7%, driven by Amazon, it's true. Google and Meta probably were up 3% on a like-for-like basis in terms of ad revenues. But I'm pretty bullish about Google. I'm bullish about Meta. I was right about that, if I can say that. I was right. I said Meta was unfairly tarnished at 130, 140. It went down to 80, but it's now 280, 290. So, and the move on Threads, I think, is a very interesting. I don't think in the scheme of things, it's huge. I mean, Twitter's ad revenues were only 5 billion at the peak, or 4.5 billion at the peak. So in relation to 115 billion or 120 billion or 125 billion this year, it's not chump change, but it's relatively small. But I think it's just a signal of the revival of Meta and the return of Meta and their focus on the issues that they had to grapple with, on costs around the metaverse, on privacy and brand safety, and they're dealing with that. So you can't get away with saying that.
Okay,
I think the platforms, digital is 2/3 of the marketplace, 950 billion, and 650 billion is digital, and it's going to be 75% by 2025. So digital continues to surge, whilst analog is under increasing pressure.
Is advertising, there was a time, maybe even just a few years ago, where almost everyone believed advertising was some sort of like winner take most market. Was that just a weird moment, or do you think that will continue to be a winner take most, or will move more to like a decentralized system?
Sorry, what do you mean? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well, we're basically like all the ad dollars for a while were being soaked up by Google, Facebook, et cetera. And there was this concern among many people that they were just going to run away with the ad market.
Well, they are going to run away with the ad market because AI is expensive to propagate. Maybe Musk has the resources in SpaceX and Tesla to create, another open AI, if you like, but there will be limited numbers of people. The companies that will dominate, in my view, are obviously Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, despite being broken up by the Chinese and being fined by the Chinese. Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok or ByteDance, those six, plus Apple and Microsoft. I think those 8, plus the software companies like Adobe and Salesforce, obviously, Oracle as well. But those are the companies. NVIDIA, obviously, making. So
basically, you're really just talking about companies that have like well over $1 billion market cap already. Are going to continue to, in some cases, in Apple's case, 3 trillion market cap, are going to be soaking up these returns.
Well, then the reason is that they're being choked off. I mean, Threads is interesting. Having been rejected by the CMA here in the UK on Giphy, and Microsoft having been given a hard time on Activision, I think for unrealistic reasons and impenetrable reasons, unless the regulator is saying big is bad. If the regulator is saying big is bad, then they have a case. But why don't they say it instead of dressing it up, cloud gaming or whatever it happens to be,
Yep.
as an excuse. So the big tech companies, having been sort of hobbled in terms of deals, are going to spend their massive research budgets on organic growth. And in a way, Threads is just another example of that, obviously on a smaller scale. But it's important to understand that. They've denied. The other thing that, be careful what you wish for, because we found out with the Ukraine war that technology is vital to develop defense, either defensively or offensively. And tech companies are going to be really important. As Germany increases as initiates its defense budgets to 2% of GDP, and others do likewise, taking it above 2% to 3 or 4%. Tech as a defender, tech as even offensively, is going to be increasingly important. So having a strong, vibrant tech sector with very strong companies is going to be important from a security point of view as well.
Now, we're taping this about a week after MediaMath announced they're headed into bankruptcy. What does the kind of fall of MediaMath tell us broadly about the ad tech ecosystem?
Well, it tells us there's a lot of volatility, that there's a lot of dislocation, because growth rates have come down. Last year we were up, net revenues were up 26%. The year before it was 43%. The year before that, the COVID year, we did brilliantly at 20%. The year before that, 40%. This year we're telling the market 6 to 10%. So what it tells you is that the growth curve is flatter. You sort of try to say, you did say it before, that the growth at Google and growth at Meta and Amazon is less than it has been. That is true, but it's still growing at significant rates. Our two big addressable markets, the platforms probably are going to grow this year by about 7%. The technology services business, the sort of stuff that Accenture and Globant and EPAM and Endava do, probably 7 to 10%. Difficult because numbers are coming down fairly significantly. But the growth is slow. So what MediaMath tells you is that when, what was it, Warren Buffett? When the tide goes out, all boats are exposed, and
we see who's naked, essentially.
That's right. Yes, yeah. So I think you see that there's private equity houses are trying to rejig their investments in some of the tech-related advertising companies, marketing services companies, etc. Brand Tech had difficulty apparently in funding the Fimilac Jellyfish merger. They were looking, I think, for $400 million, as best as I can understand. They raised, I think, 100. Fimilac had to put $50 million in, and so that was a merger. And then they jiggled the valuation to on a similar basis. So that was, and Fimilac, as I understand it, wanted to get out, and they've got further in, so they will have to be taken out by some form of IPO. Then you've got companies like Dept, which is a competitor of ours, looking for refunding, refinancing. So there are lots of things going on in the marketplace, and I think what MediaMath tells you is that there is pressure in the marketplace, and that's causing people. In that case, obviously, it was a major financial problem, but causing people to reassess the prospects.
Now, the demise of third-party cookies has been a big topic in the ad tech world for 10 years, but now it seems like it's actually happening. Like, how do you think about this?
Well, there are two things. One is deprecation of third-party cookies, and I remember it clearly. I was in Saudi Arabia, actually, in January of 2020, when the second blog came out from Google about deprecation, and that was on a 3-year time horizon. Of course, they postponed it, the effect of it, but it will happen, as you say, Auren. And then in addition to that, the IDFA changes that Apple initiated, probably quite rightly, in relation to privacy, and taken a very strong thing. So what does that mean? It means that second-party and third-party data sources become less important. and first-party data and the signals from the platforms become more important. So our clients are being driven to integrate their first-party data. Absolutely critical. I mean, big growth area for us. This is not rocket science. This is not Einstein work. This is very simple blocking and tackling, bringing data systems together. They may have been, different because of acquisition or merger. They may have been different because different CMOs or CIOs or CTOs had different views. So a bit like the spaghetti in the back of a television set, you've got to get it, to one cable and make sure that that people can talk to one another in effective ways. That's the real thing there. And then you put that together with the walled gardens that are being developed, not just by the platforms, but by the retailers, by a Walmart or a Kroger or wherever it happens to be. This is really powerful. So first-party data plus the walled gardens plus AI, that's going to be huge. I mean, that's really.
Do you think this is going to be a hit, like a general hit on real-time bidding?
Well, I don't know whether it'll be a hit on real-time bidding. We'll have to see how that pans out. But all I do know is that we're seeing huge focus on first-party data. We're seeing huge focus on the walled gardens, be it the classic platforms or the new ones that are trying to be built, as I mentioned. And those three, together with AI and the development of centralized assets that are then deployed throughout the company. I mean, interestingly, I think the two big trends at the moment are geographical fragmentation, which we sort of covered. So the world is, if it's not globalizing, like Ted Levitt mentioned, we did it for 50 years or 40 years. We had sort of Levitt globalization. I'm not saying it's deglobalizing, but it's becoming much more fragmented. You have to pick your battlefields, if I can put it that way, judiciously. That's one thing. And the second thing that's happening is that because GDP growth will be lower than it's been traditionally, I think, and interest rates and inflation and interest rates will be higher, that what you're going to see is a demand for efficiency, and therefore things like AI, things like technology services will become in greater demand. So if that means real-time bidding takes a hit, I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. But what I do know is those two forces. So judicious geographical expansion. Do I expand in China with the Taiwan risk? If I have a big position in China, no. If a big position is ending over 20% of my sales are in China, because that's China GDP is 18 billion out of 100. And if I'm less than that, maybe if I'm 7% of my sales in China, I want to be almost 2 to 3 times more. So I think it's going to continue. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is making sure that my cost systems and my costs are as efficient as possible. And AI will play a huge role in improving cost structures.
Now, the adtech ecosystem has a few, let's say, public good companies that have very high market share in their niche. Like I'm thinking MediaOcean for billing, LiveRamp, where I used to work, for connected data. How do you think about these companies?
Well, they're very highly valued. That's for sure. I mean, all the deals that I've seen around those companies in particular, I mean, LiveRamp didn't get sold to IPG. It was the point, I think the jewel in Axiom's crown, and it was too expensive for IPG to contemplate, or maybe LiveRamp and or Axiom decided that was not for them.
I think it was the latter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that it is what it is, and people, Trade Desk has done magnificently well. You haven't mentioned them, and they continue to do very well with a very high valuation. Just like our valuation has come under huge pressure in the course of the last couple of years. So I think you will have these standouts with companies which are in very good market positions with good market positioning, and there will continue to be those standout opportunities.
Now, from my perspective, a lot of advertising, particularly in ad targeting, is still surprisingly bad. Like, are there some upper limit for efficiency and accuracy that you think we could reach?
No, I think with AI, I mentioned it as sort of move number 2. after improving the efficiency of copywriting and visualization. I think hyper-personalization, the Netflix model of individual. For example, when Netflix launches a series, what you get as a piece of creative is very different to what I will get. And so it's really looking at two things. One is the first.
When do you think something like that is coming? Because today, we might get different recommendations, but we're watching the same series.
Well, I think that's coming now. I mean, it's up and running, and we've done it with Netflix, and others have done it with Netflix. And I think that model. When I was in Cannes a few weeks ago, I was somewhat surprised by the traction that model got with CMOs. When you think it was sort of bread and butter, but I think that model of testing creative on a huge, for example, I mean, historically, before AI, if you like, or in the process of development of AI, because AI has been developed since 2014 with Google and before, so it's been in development for 8 years or so, and before with AI. This model I'm going to describe gets sort of dwarfed. So we might produce 1.5 million, at least in theory, different creative executions for a Netflix series. We then test them with you. We know Auren is interested in business and is on the Wall Street Journal site. So we feed him a piece of creative which compares Narcos or whatever to a business. We know you're Manchester United, you like football. We feed you a piece of creative that is related to football. So, but that can then goes up to your question. That becomes even more sophisticated, and the plethora of options becomes even more. with consumer acceptance, dealing with the privacy issue and to some extent the brand safety issue, making sure consumers understand what they're letting themselves in for when they surrender their data or offer their data, but using the first-party data and signals from the platforms is critical. So you're even getting companies that have been traditionally run, with competing brands, looking at whether they should unify their data systems to make sure that they have all the data on all their customers across their brands. And I think that's linked to the walled gardens with the retailers, because that's another source of first-party data that would be very valuable.
Now, one of the ways you were able to grow both WPP and S4 is through acquisitions. You've probably made more acquisitions than pretty much anybody. What are some of your non-obvious learnings?
Well, if I had any non-obvious ones, they would become obvious if I told you. No, our model is different. I mean, the S4 model is totally different. One of the things at WPP, I think, was we did the earn-out model. I was often credited as being the originator model, which was tosh. I mean, it was rubbish. I mean, I've been there for many, many years before me. Probably there since, one of the Rothschilds sent the pigeons in the pigeon post at the Battle of Waterloo, with the result of the Battle of Waterloo. So, no, it's been around. But the trouble with the earn-out model was that people didn't integrate during the earn-out period. And that for example, if you had a deal that was done by Ogilvy or by JWT or Y&R or whatever, the natural human reaction was leave it alone in the earn-out period, and you didn't prepare for the post-earn-out period. So I thought maybe a different approach where we call it a merger, not acquisition, where we bring in people on a 50-50 basis. In other words, you sell half of your equity for cash and half for stock. So 40% of S4 is owned by people inside it. Now, you would think that model was more motivational, at least in theory. What's interesting, it comes back to the sort of question I touched on before. People by their nature are not sharers. So if you have really good people in your organization, they tend not to be sharers in terms of information, and they like to take credit themselves.
Yeah,
I think what the theory behind this model is that we would have people who not only were good but were sharers, and I think that's a really critical point. That's why I think AI is really going to be interesting, because the deeper you go down into an organization, the more you find the propensity to share is even greater. So people who have to do the nitty gritty and the hard lifting really really like the idea of sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, sharing information, sharing insights on an integrated basis. It's people running brands or running separate brands inside a company tend not to want to do that, which I think is a terrible mistake.
Is there some sort of like psychological thing? Like it's like I think of myself as on the WPP team rather than on the Ogilvy team, or and somehow you have to switch from one to the other.
That's a branding issue, and you're right in the sense, if you start a company in your basement or your garage or whatever from zero, you're very attached to your brand. But our branding, Media Monk's branding, which was developed by Wes Terhar, along with his colleagues, it really gives us the flexibility. The media.monks, you couldn't call yourselves formula.monks if you're in technology services, or data.monks, or digital media.monks, whatever it happens to be, or finance.monks or legal.monks. I mean, it's a great system for trying to bring that together. What you're saying is a little bit different. And you have to remember that WPP, the companies you mentioned, JWC, Ogilvy, Y&R, Gray, were all NYSE listed companies. They were all trying to do what WPP was. So there was a natural sort of competitive element to it between the brands. Now, there are some examples. Arnaud's brilliant development of LVMH is based on individual brands that effectively compete with one another. And he is the master. I mean, there is nobody better in terms of managing brands on a global basis. In his case, in the luxury area. So, and the first $500 billion company in Europe. So incredibly successable, and runs it in a different system. So it is possible to do these things. But if you look at the holding companies, they are. When I was at WPP, we talked about horizontality, and that a word is now banned there. But trying to create one brand. And I think that's what you have to do. I think the power, McKinsey or Goldman are basically professional services businesses, I think, that have developed one brand.
And why is one brand? Why is it so important? Obviously, if you think of the CPG companies like Procter and Gamble and Unilever, they're so powerful because they have these other crests as a brand or whatever.
But then there's always the cannibalization and the focus issue. No, because in our case, we have 9,000 people, close to 9,000 people in 32 countries, 57 offices. And what we're trying to do is to make all of those people available to clients as and when needed and where needed.
Yep.
And that's the key thing. So having a point of contact where you have access to the whole organization and the knowledge of the organization is critical. That is where you get the economies of scale.
So you're saying maybe in services companies like a McKinsey, Accenture, BCG, it makes sense to have one brand, but in more product companies like a CPG or LVMH, it might make sense to have multiple brands.
To your point, WPP, I thought it was a market share battle. And so adding, Ogilvy to JWT made sense. The pattern of clients around Ford and Unilever, they'd actually, interestingly, David Ogilvy had a couple of conversations with the management at Thomson about merging before I got there. So, there's that. And then Y&R made sense as well. Patent Ford again. In that case, they had Colgate, so we managed that separately. Part of the reason for the separation of brands was conflict. But now I think conflict is less of a significance. McKinsey and Goldman handle conflict incredibly well when you think about it by division and also temporarily. They might be working for a competitive client for a period of time and then they go work for the other client.
Yep.
So, or the competitive client. So, no, I think that the real opportunity now is to create one brand, one P&L, not have people fighting with one another to competing with one another, but using resources, leverage them. But it's difficult to do. You can build an argument. It's far better. And, Arnaud is a classic example of that, has his separate brands. And as I understand it, they operate, because constellation of stars, I think one of the creative directors described it as. And that constellation works brilliantly. There is no better. So there is no magic formula. I think you have to find it. But in our business, I think the game will be won by the companies that really integrate their offer and make available the offer and knowledge. I think you want to get to a stage where every one of our 9,000 people or so knows what the other 8,999 are thinking. That's why I think AI is such a big opportunity if properly executed.
And so it's hard to even know when to integrate the brand. If you think of like Google, okay, Google Maps was integrated from an acquisition, but YouTube was always kept as a separate brand. And so in some cases they did the integration, some cases they didn't. It's hard to know like a priori what to do when.
Well, I think that's true. And you see it in product companies as well. When product companies buy, a digital asset, they're an analog company and they buy a digital asset. Do you keep it separate?
Yep.
Do you integrate it? Do you keep it separate for a period of time and then integrate it afterwards? I mean, there are littered. The world is littered with examples where that fails. The management of the digital company is very entrepreneurial and they don't like to be integrated in any way, shape, or form, and people leave, etc. So it's difficult to maintain the balance.
Now, how do you think of acquisitions changing now that the cost of capital has risen?
Well, I think you have to be a shrewder, if you like. I mean, when the cost of capital was zero or appeared to be zero, or even negative, it was a different ballgame. Now you're going to have to be much, and that's why I think we're going to see a lot more positioning going on in the marketplace. You asked about MediaMath. That's a straw in the wind that indicates that we're going to have things are going to be more selective, and people are going to be more careful, and valuations will come down. I mean, the private equity market, I don't think has marked to market. Somebody said to me, "Oh, that doesn't matter because in time." It will be dealt with, meaning the growth will bail it out. I disagree. I mean, I think there should be a more realistic. I mean, what private equity gets away with blue murder, by the way. I mean, there was an example recently in our industry, just to make the point, where there was a big social issue in one country in Europe, one of our competitors, private equity owned, never saw the light of day. I mean, this was a big social issue case, and put it like that, never saw the light of day. If that was for a listed company in the public sector, all hell would break loose. And so the standards to which, and I know the private equity people say that is not the case, but the standards to which they are judged and under, even in relation to an issue like just talking about, totally different. I think that's one of the reasons why private equity is so attractive. I mean, apart from the carry not being taxed, or the Labour government, I think, said over the weekend, Rachel Reeves said that she'd be doing something about that, not taxed at income rates, but it is a benefit of employment. Apart from that, I mean, they are held to a different standard to listed companies.
It does seem like in the past, with when the cost of capital was low, private equity companies could pay more and they're going to win most of the bids.
Whereas valuations, and the other thing, Auren, people said that the reason that they did well was because interest rates coming down, so they refi the thing, and then also multiple expansion. And so I remember there was an FT ad that said, a third of the gains that PE made were due to multiple expansion, a third to refi of, as interest rates came down. And the third one was, hard work on getting the businesses better.
Yep.
And that was the other third. So I think you're right. I think valuations will come down, and I think people will be will be more cautious about what they do.
But it seems like in a world where the cost of capital is going up, it means that the strategic buyers potentially could pay more. In a world where the cost of capital is lower, it means the private equity companies could pay more. And so it seems like the strategic companies will be more likely to win the bids, at least in the next couple of years, as the cost of capital is higher.
Yeah, possibly.
Because they can reduce costs more. They have more other things they could do.
Possibly, but the PE companies may become more cautious. But I remember when I started S4, I went and saw a number of the PE companies, and one of them, I would say who it was, said, I said, every PE company I saw, this was in 2008, said they were net sellers. And yet they were raising new money at the time. And I remember one of the most prominent PE managers said, Martin, you don't understand the PE business. It's about raising money. When you can't raise the money, the music stops. Because you think about
it's all about the AUM.
You think about the management fee and the carry and everything like that. So it's a different model. And the other thing I think, which is really, really important to understand, is that their time horizons, despite what they say about longer term funds and funding, and with continuation funds, they manage to keep the music on, but essentially their time horizons are 4 or 5 years or 3 or 4 years. And that's another thing I think that's really important to understand, is that volatility it naturally increases. That building long-term brands is a more difficult task than it ever has been, because attention spans are getting shorter. And I remember Facebook telling us that Italian women spent two seconds on an average post, so we created 2-second ads. I mean, it is really important to understand that, I think, and so long-term brand building is much more difficult.
Now, you're 78 years old, and you know more about media and technology than most people in their 20s and 30s. We can even tell.
I don't think so.
I mean, we can tell even from this discussion. Like, what's your secret to keeping up with the pace of change?
Well, I try and read a fair bit. I mean, I remember always Warren Buffett's advice. Read the Wall Street Journal, read the Financial Times. Immerse yourself in that. I mean, my image of Warren is he sits in Omaha, Nebraska, reading the papers.
That's all he does, right?
Yes, he does.
And so plays some bridge.
And obviously talks to a lot of people. So I think, you absorb, you listen, you read as much as you possibly can, you learn as much as you possibly can. Now a lot of it is visual. CNBC, I find.
You watch TV news?
I watch, like if I'm in London, I will watch the 10 o'clock news, and then I like Newsnight, particularly. I watch Newsnight and then drop off about 10 past 11 at night. If I'm in America, I try and do that with, CNBC and it used to be Charlie Rose, but no longer. Well, yeah, I think Charlie Rose still has a program, or has a program now, but used to that it used to be. I watch. Yeah, I do watch the news, but not the extreme channels. I try and get the more balanced ones, but extreme to one person is not extreme to another. So.
And we've been also talking to a lot of health experts and like health and aging. Like you're in excellent health. You've got incredible vitality.
I had a tumor in February, and which was cut out, and I'm undergoing preventive treatment. But I think I've been lucky. 1 in 2 people get cancer, apparently. In their lifetime. So, and it's amazing when you get it and people know about it, how many people, have gone through a similar experience. And I've spoken to a lot of people who had it far worse than me.
What do you attribute your excellent health to? Is there
my mother's genes?
Your genes, okay. Nothing. So nothing we could copy except if we had the same mother.
No. Well, I mean, you're doing exercise. I mean, since my operation, I probably haven't done as much exercise as I should do, but that's important. But my oncologist has said, pescatarian diet and walk an hour a day.
Okay, so just normal stuff. Okay. All right, two more questions before I leave. What is one conspiracy theory that you believe?
Oh, conspiracy theory. Gosh, what a question. Well, I think I do believe that the Russians, I do think Vladimir Putin, who is reputed to be worth 75 billion or whatever it is, probably has a group of hedge fund experts around him, who before he launched the Ukrainian war was
He
shorting
was
the
shorting
markets.
certain things. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I was.
That
It was
seems
really
like not
interesting.
even a conspiracy. It seems just rational that they should do that, right?
Well, I know irrational, but I was always intrigued that he had two yachts. He had one yacht, apparently, I think, with somebody sort of fronting it, with being built in some shipyard somewhere, Denmark or somewhere, and then his mini yacht was moved. You could plot it on the navigation apps that it was moved from somewhere in the Mediterranean, I think it was, to the Russian Baltic Sea, about 10 days before the invasion. I thought to me, so I believe that in the North Koreans, and I think trying to influence elections. I think that's probably, whether that's conspiracy theory or not. I think that happens, and AI, will enable the bad actors, as we've heard continuously, to be even more effective.
All right, last question we ask all of our guests. What conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
Bad advice. I know what is good advice, like learn Chinese and learn code, and maybe Spanish as well now. I think I'd add that in.
You think languages are still important in the world where...
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, it's a really good question, because obviously with AI, I mean, I saw this. So I saw this model. It was an ex-Google coder who started a model, an RFP AI model, and he could translate that into any language, he said. So to be smart, or smart ass, I had Sanya Patelo on, who's a Serbo-Croatian, and she runs our S4S Ventures venture capital portfolio. And I said to be a smart ass to the guy running. I said, "Oh, can you translate that into any language?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, why don't you try Serbo-Croatian?" Thinking, because Sanya can see whether it's right or wrong. And blow me down, within a few seconds, they translated a bidding document into 3 Serbo-Croatian versions. And it wasn't dialects. It was, because the English translation was semantically, you could interpret it in different ways. They had 3 different interpretations. Sanya picked version A because she thought that was the best
Wow.
of doing it. So you're right, but I still think it's really important, because from a human point of view, understanding the culture and the language is, I think, critically important. So yes, I do think it will be, but maybe you're right. You're right in a way. It's lesser. What do I think is bad advice? Well, I'll come back to that sharing bit, that people, that good people are difficult to manage, which is a bad thing to say, by the way, because then average people think that to be good, they should be difficult. So you defeat your purpose. But I think really, the more I see it, if you can get, the critical issue is to get people aligned to the purpose, to the objectives you're trying to achieve. I mean, so many companies I've seen over the years, if the CEOs saw what we saw, in terms of the political differences, whether geographic or capability or client or whatever, I mean, it's frightening. And if you can just get people aligned, and it's not, maybe the bad advice is that, financial structures are the structure. It doesn't matter what the financial structure is. That's still a human trait not to share. And so I think that's a critically important thing, and wrestling with that is really difficult.
This has been awesome. Thank you, Martin Sorrell, for joining us on Roll to Death. It's been a lot of fun.
Good. Thank you, Auren. Thanks for the opportunity.